Perception doesn't always match reality, and that is particularly true in the automotive industry. Car companies are very entrenched businesses that have been around for decades and put out hundreds of different products of varying quality. As such, there can kind of be this image built up around a brand that might not necessarily reflect the quality or diversity of cars that they are now producing today. So we are going to run through a handful of different car companies that, in my estimation, feel a little bit underappreciated by the market, whether that is a lack of appreciation for their current models, their history, or some combination of both. So to start us off, we are going to talk about Volvo. And Volvo is a brand that I just don't think gets enough love, and it was really the inspiration behind making this video. Even among car enthusiasts, if you just ask them to list off European car brands, typically we're going to get pretty far down the list before Volvo's name gets brought up. And one big reason for that is, despite being a pretty well-established car maker, in the US, they don't move a ton of inventory. Now, I do see new Volvos pretty often living in the Northeast, but for large swaths of the country, Volvo basically doesn't exist. And that's a shame because they legitimately do make some very good products. Their pricing is very competitive with other European luxury brands like BMW, Audi, or Mercedes, and the quality and features that are put into new Volvo models, it's largely on par. And their lineup covers a pretty wide range. They've got a few different sedans, they've got a half dozen crossover SUVs, and they also produce the one type of vehicle that enthusiasts claim to love but don't seem to buy a lot of: wagons. Now, the big advantage for Volvo is that largely their models are considered to be significantly more reliable as well as cheaper to repair and maintain compared to some of those more traditional luxury brands. But for the reason why Volvo doesn't really get recognized for any of this is because they aren't one of those other brands. They aren't BMW, they're not Porsche, they're not Mercedes. And as such, they're not able to cash in on their name recognition or just their brand cachet in the same way. Those other car brands have spent literally billions of dollars creating a hype and a brand image around what it means to drive a BMW, a Mercedes, a Porsche, or an Audi. To this day, all of those different car companies build these really exciting, high-performance halo products to create enthusiasm around the brand and to drive sales of lesser models. Meanwhile, Volvo's kind of claim to fame is that they have very high safety ratings, which is awesome and is something important that you should look for in a car, but isn't something that traditionally really drives sales. Particularly in the luxury segment, the badge on the front end of the car is one of the biggest selling points, and Volvo just doesn't have that type of equity. But if you are someone who wants a vehicle in this segment, but you don't necessarily want the flash or the kind of wealth flex of driving one of those other cars, and maybe you do care about safety, Volvo is an excellent choice. Now, the next car company we are going to talk about is Mazda. Now, Mazda has made incredible strides over the past 15 or so years, and they've received a lot of critical acclaim for this progress, but to this day, the brand is still underrated. Now, to approach this first from the enthusiast angle, over Mazda's history, they have produced a lot of awesome sports cars, and they've also been excellent stewards of the Wankel rotary engine. But in terms of Mazda as a mass market automaker, where they would really hit their strides would be in the early 2010s. The first big thing that happened here was the introduction of the Kodo design language. Basically, Mazda just started putting a lot more effort into the aesthetics of their cars, and I think it really does show. They have this kind of premium flair for what is at heart an economy automaker. The other big initiative that came out at this time was the introduction of Sky Active. Basically, Mazda's attempt to launch a new series of engines as well as redesigned chassis. And while largely I kind of think this is a bit of a marketing gimmick, it does show that Mazda is serious about putting effort, energy, and money into improving their models. What this has ended up resulting in is that Mazda now has extremely competitive products. Again, they kind of offer this taste of a premium experience bordering on the line of being a luxury automaker while still being priced as an economy car. So since then, Mazda's cars have become very, very competitive, and not just in terms of price, but in terms of the experience that they are able to offer you. When you look at a lot of the cars in this segment, their interiors and their overall design is just very utilitarian. You look at Mazda and it looks like they actually take pride in how their vehicles look, and they put effort into making the interior nice while still being affordable. You could argue with some of Mazda's design choices, it's like they're trying to build a knockoff BMW, but if the end product is still good, I am here for it. Now, Mazda may not have the same reputation for reliability of a Toyota or a Honda, but they still do build very reliable cars, and they're also very pretty to look at and nice to be in. And they've received a lot of good press for this, but I still think they are slept on. For maybe one of the more controversial picks on this list, we have Ford. Now, Ford is not underrated in terms of their sales because they do sell a ton of cars. But where I think they are a little bit underrated is amongst enthusiasts, because Ford has an incredibly interesting history, and they also have a very diverse and interesting lineup as of today. Not only does Ford have a long history in motorsport, they have a long history in a lot of different kinds of motorsport, from Formula One to Grand Touring racing to racing at Le Mans to desert racing to FD. Ford has pretty much dabbled in everything, and a lot of the technology from these different motorsport pursuits end up making it into their production cars. Their lineup as of today has to be one of the most well-versed in the entire car market. Obviously, we have the F-150, which has been the best-selling vehicle in the US for like the last 40 years. Then they also have one of the most successful compact trucks in the form of the Maverick. As of the past few years, they have been basically the only car company to come out with a worthy competitor to the Jeep Wrangler in the form of the new Bronco. They also make the Explorer, which has become the de facto choice for just about every single US police department. They are one of the few legacy US automakers that has been able to come out with a competitive EV in the form of the Mustang Mach-E. They also build one of the longest continually produced sports car models in the entire world in the form of the Ford Mustang, and they are gearing up to build an extremely high performance version of that Mustang with the GTD. And in their very recent past, Ford is not all that far separated from producing a legitimate supercar in the form of the Ford GT, and they also basically created an entire new segment of high performance pickups with the advent of the Raptor. Now, the argument against Ford would be that while they build some of these really cool vehicles, they also build a lot of cars that just aren't that good. And I will concede that is 100% true. For a very long time, Ford built a lot of just junk cars. And even up to this day, there are plenty of models in the Ford lineup that I would not touch with a 10-foot pole. To put this another way, Ford is a brand that has some very high highs and some very low lows. But that's true of just about every single car company, and I just don't think Ford gets enough recognition for the good work that they do. Likely another controversial pick here is going to be the selection of the Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis brands. Now, just to dive headfirst into it, these companies have received a lot of flack over the past few years over the entire Kia Boys saga. And while they certainly deserve all the smoke, all the bad press for that mistake, we shouldn't also write off just how far this car company has come. It wasn't all that long ago when Hyundai and Kia were the most bottom of the barrel automakers, where they wouldn't have one desirable model in their entire lineup. But in the past 20 years, they have played their cards right, they've invested in the right things, they've played their strategic hands, and they have come a very, very long way. I think the pinnacle of this is Genesis, who has become a legitimate player in the luxury car space, offering near identical quality and features to the legacy luxury brands, while still being sold at a pretty steep discount. Hyundai has really established themselves as a high-quality economy automaker, and I largely think they are now on par with some of the Japanese brands. Where 15, 20 years ago, absolutely no one was going to recommend that you buy a Hyundai or a Kia unless you had a double-digit credit score, these cars are now really good quality. They offer a lot of good value, and they are now very, very competitive within the broader car market. And I just don't always think we recognize that, and we still have some of these kind of previous notions floating around about what these brands are and the type of vehicles that they produce. Lastly, let's talk about Lamborghini. Now, when I say Lamborghini is underrated, there is a very specific group of people that I think it is underrated by, and that is going to be some of these more older, more entrenched car enthusiasts. Now, it is impossible to have any serious conversation about Lamborghini without also mentioning Ferrari. Going back to the inception of the company, of the inception of Lamborghini Automobili, it was as a middle finger to Ferrari. And for the vast majority of time that Lamborghini has been around, it has been playing second fiddle to Ferrari. Ferrari had winning race cars. Their model line was more diverse. They had just more credibility in the supercar market. And they also had a lot more cachet built up around their brand. But over the past few years, that has started to change. Lamborghini has built up a ton of equity. And at the same time, while Ferrari is still uber popular, I think they've hurt some of the prestige of their brand by being kind of hostile to enthusiasts. And looking past just the brand and at the actual product itself, Lamborghini is now capable of building a car that is on par with just about any single Ferrari. Just take a quick look at this segment. The Revuelto is now the only V12 naturally aspirated supercar that costs south of $1 million. Looking a little bit more on the entry-level side of the market, where the Huracan is now being phased out with the Tamario, Lamborghini did make the choice to downsize the powertrain from a V10 to a turbo V8, but they have not gone to the same extents that Ferrari has had with introducing a V6 and the 296 GTB into what should be their V8 supercar. And looking back on some of the previous models, Lamborghinis are becoming increasingly desirable, especially those that featured manual transmissions. Now, to put a bow on all of this, younger car enthusiasts get it. They see Ferrari and Lamborghini as basically being on the same level, but I think there is kind of this stigma around the Lamborghini brand with some of these older, snobbier, more entrenched car enthusiasts. So that is it. Those are 5 car companies that I think are underrated, underappreciated by the broader car market. All of these companies have unique things about them that are differentiators in their segment. They all have really cool histories and they make a lot of interesting products, but I just don't think that they get the recognition that they deserve.